conducting, I'll be conducting the C1 High program. Okay, so just so you know, the C1 High, this is for the Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus levels. There have been some changes and modifications. The changes were originally launched last term. However, they've finalized some other changes. And I'm going to go over some of those in case you did not teach the higher level last term. In addition, I'm going to be going over the program, the overview of the program, the class structure, some of the fundamental skills, as well as some tips and suggestions when covering different components for those of you who are new or veterans. In addition, I'll go over the SMART textbook so you guys can take a look at that, as well as some reminders and questions at the end. We do ask that you hold all questions to the very end of the meeting. That way we can get through everything. So if you have any questions about any specific component, please write it down, and then we'll have a section for questions afterwards. Okay. All right. So let's get started. So here the C1 levels, again, are Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus. They're basically the highest levels. For these levels, keep in mind that you're also going to be conducting the IBT TOEFL for the achievement test, which is different for the other students where you're teaching the TOEFL Junior. Here, the IBT TOEFL, just so you know, is more of an academic-based test. Here, it's also going to be a lot more difficult, especially if you have students who are in the Eagle level. The whole test and the level of work is going to be a lot more higher, and you're going to need to help work with them a little bit more. Okay, so here, these are the objectives of the program. This is also listed in the segment guide, which you should have access to or you should have been emailed. If you don't have access to that, you can contact your FM or TL. In addition, it should be on the FTP already. Okay. So one of the great things about the C1 program compared to the A2 program, which some of you may have just taught for the first time, is that they are topical-based lessons. So basically what that means is that the reading, listening, writing, and speaking components will all have the similar topic. The only difference is they do have a little bit different of a perspective, but it is cohesive. This means it's a little bit easier for you to gain interest and build interest in the topic with your students, as well as media cards and other types of videos to help make the class a little bit more fun. Unlike the A2 program, if you remember, you would have different readings on different subjects. For example, for one reading, you're talking about spiders. The next one, you're talking about the Renaissance, and so forth and so forth, okay? So keep that in mind. So just a note, make sure you input your full name. We're taking attendance still, okay? So please put your full name if you haven't already. So here, that's really good, actually. I really like that everything is topical based. And obviously, some of the topics are really fun. Some of the topics are not going to be as good, but you still have something to work with other than like the A2 where you had to have different ones. For example, here's the Eagle level. Some of the fun ones that I remember were future foods, as well as advertising mayhem. Those were some of the fun ones that they kept there and we really liked. For the Alba and Albatross Plus levels, all these are a little bit new, so keep that in mind. But all of them should be able to be something that they can work with. Keep in mind that here, a lot of them will be more academic based, not narrative based or exposition based, okay? So here, just keep that in mind for the reading and you'll see that when we're coming up, okay? So here, this is a general overview of how I conduct my classes. This is not exactly the same as it is in the segment guide. So pretty much when I'm doing my class, my goal is to have the topic connect, which is basically like an introduction to the reading section done within the first hour. What that does is that gives me basically the second hour. I should have started the reading and I should get that started right away because the readings can be very long and I'll show you some of those in the SMART textbooks. I also want to start the listening, okay, before the end of the second hour, okay? So usually around 20 minutes before, I want to make sure that I have the listening started, I've introduced it, and I've maybe gone over it, and even maybe gotten the topic and thesis statement as far as note-taking has already been done. Then for the third hour, I'm going to finish my listening, go over questions, and then I want to give myself 30 to 40 minutes at the end of class to either conduct speaking or writing, okay? The writing will take a little bit longer, and also with some of the changes and modification, you definitely are going to want around 40 minutes to be able to go over the writing, have the students practice some, and then give them some feedback on the writing. The speaking probably won't take as long because for this term, you're not doing integrated speaking, you're just doing an opinion speaking. So that's a little bit easier to cover, and I'll go over that also in the SMART textbook. So just to keep in mind, odd weeks, weeks 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 will all be writing lessons, and then even weeks will be speaking lessons. For the writing lessons, because for this term's achievement test, students will be required to do the integrated writing, they've actually implemented that and put that into the lesson. It actually works out really well, and I'm going to show you how you can also help them with their homework, as well as how to implement the integrated writing if you're not familiar with it, okay? So the integrated writing, though, is only weeks 1, 3, 5, and 7. So it's really important that week 1, you introduce the writing. I know week 1 is really difficult, because you're doing introductions, you have a lot of new students and everything like that. But if you think about it, you only have 4 classes or 4 times to show them the integrated writing. If you miss one, that means there's only 3 classes left to do it. So keep that in mind. That I know you think, oh, well, we have a lot of time until the end of the term or until the actual achievement test, but you only have 4 classes to teach them integrated writing, and it isn't easy, okay? So then afterwards, they'll start into the persuasive and opinion writing weeks 9, 11, and 13. Again, this is all on the segment guide, so you can always review that, okay? Okay, so here, I'm gonna go over the class components, and I'm gonna go backwards and forwards a little bit between the smart books as well as my slides, okay? So one of the things that is really different from the C1 High program is the critical skills. The beginning of the lesson, you'll have critical skills, which will basically start getting students, all right, prepared for the master's level. Here, for example, these are just the lessons that you'll have in the Eagle: identifying purpose and tone, ironic and sarcastic, fact and opinion, informed and uninformed opinions. These lessons don't actually relate to the achievement test or an IBT TOEFL, but again, this is more critical thinking, something that they're going to need when they enter the master's or even use in some of the other programs, okay? So just to give you an idea, okay, so here is C1 Albatross Plus, okay? And if I look at the beginning of my lesson, it'll always start off here with my critical skill, okay? The critical skill is actually several pages. It used to be upwards of 18 to like 20 pages, but they narrowed it down due to feedback from other teachers. It was just too much, okay? But even with the narrowed down, it's still about 11 pages. The pages are filled with both introduction to the skill as well as practices, okay? The introductions are called the prime sections. And then for each prime, you'll have a couple of practices. In order to manage this within the amount of time that you're going to have, I recommend that one, you only do a few of the practices, or you only guide them through 1 or 2 and then have them try the other ones on their own. You should review these prime and practices and decide which ones are the best ones, because there are questions later on in both the reading and listening that relate to this skill. There's usually one in the reading and one in the listening. So therefore, you want to make sure that you do cover these skills. Otherwise, when they get to the reading questions and the listening questions, they won't be able to answer that one question, okay? In addition, this is just something I do. I know different teachers like it different ways, but here, if you look, there are 3 primes, okay? So there's 3 prime pages. One second. So there's 1, 2, and 3, okay? So here, the first one and the third one are exactly the same. It's kind of like the diagnose page that you do in the A2. The first page will say, hey, try to figure out what is the answer or what is whatever the skill is. Then on the third page, it's actually a repetition and they give the answer. The second page is just the skill and explains whatever it is. So usually what I'll do is I will actually not use, okay, the first and last page, or first and third page. I'll usually only use the second page, which will introduce the skill, and then I'll go straight to a few practices. For me, that's a little bit easier. I do know some teachers, they actually like to use the prime, and then the second page, and then the prime again. And then they don't use as many practices. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, so this is prime and practice. Again, you have to cover these, but it can take a lot of your time. So you want to just keep that in mind, okay? Okay, so for each lesson, there's different types of prime and practice. After you do the prime and practice, you're going to go into your topic connect or your introduction to your reading, okay? So here, this is where I want to be by the end of the first hour. I want to make sure that I've introduced today's topic. I've had my students maybe discuss it. I've showed a media card or had a video on that way they have an idea of it. Hopefully, if I'm lucky, I've also gone over maybe my skills and I'm ready to go to the actual reading by the time they come back from their first break. Okay. So here, the skills for the C1 high are pretty much the same as any other program that you've done A2 or C1 low mid. Okay. You'll be introducing them to the skills of skim, scan, and annotate. Okay. In addition, you should know the Cheongdam pizza. They should know what is the Cheongdam pizza, what are we looking for, and how do we find it. Okay. A good thing to use for our program is for our branch is also to make sure that we use the workbooks. So in the student's workbook, each lesson does have a skill that builds upon each other. So instead of always doing the Cheongdam pizza, because this is Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus, and they've probably already heard the Cheongdam pizza 50 billion times in all the other levels, you can utilize the workbook and tell them to open up to lesson 1 or lesson 2. Okay, here it'll give a little bit more in-depth information and a little bit more skills that they can build upon that they've already learned. For example, here in this one, okay, we're learning the skill theory. Again, it's the same thing: topic, main ideas, thesis statements, supporting details, right? But in addition, we're also showing them how to outline a passage, something that they really need to be able to do, especially as they move up into the Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus level. This is a skill that they can use for both their reading as well as their listening. Here is another skill. Okay, here again, remember, it's not also what you look for, but also how you find it. So you should have different tips and tricks and skills, transition words, magic numbers, repeated words on how they can find that key information they'll need to answer questions quickly on the actual test. Okay, so for the actual book, okay, here is what you'll get pretty much is a very long passage with a little bit of a area right here in the smart textbook for students to write notes. Okay, now I know probably you've had the same situation. A lot of the tablets, they have dead spots. Students can't write very well. Overall, it doesn't work very well. So usually what we'll do at our branch is we'll have students use their workbooks. Okay, so in the workbook, okay, which is on the left, there's the identical reading that's also in the smart tablet. Here, students can then just use pencil and paper. They can write their notes. They can annotate on the side, okay? And here, this is just a little bit easier. That way the technology doesn't become a disadvantage in this case, okay? So here, when you are prepping for your work, unlike the A2 high or unlike the A2 or C1 low mids, right? They aren't going to give you guys as much guidance, okay? So they're not going to give you the highlighted sentences and say, here's the thesis, here's the main ideas, and here are the major details, okay? When you are in the smart book, all you'll get is a little bit of notes, okay? So on the right-hand side, this is the smart textbook, okay? So all you'll get is a little bit of notes telling you, hey, this is what we thought was, you know, some important notes that should be in the student's workbook or you should hit on as the teacher. They do not show you where is the thesis statement. They do not show you the repeated words. They will not show you the transition words or keywords, okay? This is your responsibility now as an Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus teacher to be able to prep the lesson and make sure you can identify those. That way you can elicit from students and guide them to the correct answers, okay? So for example, on the left-hand side, okay, is something that I would prep out personally. I would have my own set of notes, what I think is important, and then I would have lists of transition words or repeated words or keywords that would help guide my students to that. Here, usually I write my notes on the board. That way students can view it and see it, okay? I guess if you wanted to, if you have a copy of the actual workbook and you have like a program, you could actually write it on your TV, but usually it's just a little bit easier to write it on the board, okay? So here, if you also tell, my notes are a little bit different than the notes that they have provided, okay? So I recommend that you should be doing the same thing. You should know these transition words, keywords, right? How to identify the thesis, the main ideas, and major details. Keep in mind that these are the notes that they'll need in order to answer the questions later on, okay? So also for the reading, just keep in mind, not all the readings are academics. They've updated them so they're more academic based. Okay. However, some of the readings are exposition based, meaning they're like articles from news stories and stuff. So therefore, they're not always going to follow the same set of skills. For example, you're going to have paragraphs that are just one sentence, and you're going to have readings that I think are upwards. They say 18 paragraphs. It's not actually a full 18 paragraphs, but it's like a news article that's very long. Okay. So you're going to have to modify your questions in that way. Mainly when I do those, I don't usually focus on the basic skills like transition words and keywords. I usually focus more on WH questions, like who are they talking about, where is it happening, and why is it happening? Okay, so you just want to be prepared for that. However, they did modify some of them, and most of them are more academic based, especially on the odd weeks that you do the integrated writing, because you need an academic based, usually more format to do that. Okay. Okay. So just to give you an idea. Okay. So here, if I press the answer key, that's all that they give you. Okay. And then some of the older lessons, what's really annoying is they don't put the notes next to the paragraph. So basically for this first page, right, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, like all the notes are just jammed up to the top. So that's another reason why you should have your own set of notes. Otherwise, you'll be scrolling up and down, up and down. In all honesty, you should be using this answer key for the reading section. Okay. Also, on a side note, I noticed that some teachers, especially new teachers, they'll see this audio button. Okay. So yes, there is an audio function that actually speaks out the reading for you. So for example,
among the many unexpected side effects of the global COVID-19.
Okay, so this is not supposed to be used during the lesson. Okay, the reason this is here is for the students when they do their homework and they can access the book online. If they want, they can listen to the reading again and follow along with it. Okay, so you should not be doing any listening component during the reading section. Okay, so again, here, this is a pretty basic paragraph. It's 4 paragraphs. Okay, but there are other ones that are going to be much longer and be a little bit different. So just a heads up on that. Okay. All right, so then, I'm sorry, people are still coming in. Then you have the scan, which is basically answering the questions, okay? So if you remember, I told you that usually one of them is based off of the skill that the critical skill that you taught at the beginning, okay? So here, based on the perspective presented, it looks like question number 2 and maybe question number 3, okay? So just keep that in mind, okay? Here for the questions, they actually do not cover all of the IBT TOEFL style questions. Just keep that in mind. They don't cover all of them. So there will be ones, for example, like the summary questions, the ones where you have to take an essay and summarize it if you're familiar with that. But it is mainly factual, negative factual, and stuff like that. So you still want to be able to identify questions, identify keywords, right, and eliminate wrong ones. And hopefully using your notes, you should be able to identify those and guide your students. Okay. Okay. So here afterwards, there is a discuss page. The discuss page is just a repetition of the whole reading. You do not need to do the reading again. You do not need to really go over anything in the reading. All you need to do is discuss the general topic of what they were, what the reading was about. Here's where you're going to use media cards. You're going to use videos. And here you just want to have a discussion. You can pick one of the paragraphs as a general topic or one of the characters as a general topic. But here it's just the idea that you should discuss. You should create some type of group discussion with your students on the topic. It's kind of like, if you want, think about it, it's like a little break after they've just done a lot of work. Okay. And that's pretty much the reading section. Okay. Then moving on to the listening section. Again, like I said, okay, for the higher levels, they are not going to give you much of information. They're not even going to give you really a set of notes. Okay. So here, this is pretty much all you get. Okay. It's basically an audio that says take notes. Okay. Again, as I stated with the reading section, getting your students to actually write their notes on the tablets is really difficult. However, in the workbooks, there is a section right after the reading section where it actually is for listening, note taking. So you should have your students open up their workbook and take notes, okay? Obviously, just like you did in A2 or C1, you should introduce some note-taking skills, right? How to write short notes, abbreviate. Different people use different things. You can use the ask method, but here you want to build upon that. And again, the original skill methods of the outline section for the lesson 1 is a great skill that you could repeat on and show them how to indent and how to organize their notes appropriately, okay? So for this, again, just to show you, okay, if I press the light bulb, I get nothing. Okay, so it's just a blank page and it says, hey, listen and take notes. The only thing that really you need is this audio button.
It may be true that the COVID.
Okay, so unlike the other lessons, it's not broken down where you get just the topic and thesis, like, hey, just listen for topic and thesis, or you have some blanks that you can fill in. It is just basically a 4-minute to 5-minute audio that you need to help them write notes on. Okay, I do not recommend at the beginning of the term that you just say, hey, go for it and try. Okay, usually what you'll do is in the beginning, you'll have more guidance, and then as the term progresses, it'll become more independent. Okay, however, when you guide them, it doesn't mean that you're going to have the ability to get through the whole thing. Okay, so usually at the beginning, I'm going through maybe the topic, the thesis, and usually 1 or 2 main ideas. Okay, and letting them get some of the major details. Okay, because I want to help them with the organization and stuff. Okay, so at some point, right, you want to help them out, but you also have to let them try some of it on their own. Okay, so here for the listening section, it's important that you're prepared. Okay, some of the listenings are very difficult and you can easily make a mistake. Okay, and guide your students to the wrong answers. Okay, especially when you're doing this. Okay, because there's really no guidance. Okay, so here, this is how I would prep for my class. Okay, so on the left hand side, this like I said, it doesn't show you anything, but on the left hand side, this is basically like the script. Okay, so you should have access to the scripts in the SIGs. Okay, so in the script, it's basically like prepping the reading. If you can prep a reading, you can prep a listening script. Okay, the only difference maybe I might add are timestamps, so I know where I need to pause or where I want to go back to for certain questions. Okay, but overall, it's the same idea. I'm going to be focusing on transition words. I'm going to be focusing on keywords and how things relate or support each other. Okay, on the right hand side, this would be a set of notes that I'd be looking for students to have by the end of the time. Okay, again, I'll write this on the board. Okay, I'll listen from students and then I'll pause and play, especially at the beginning. Okay, so for this is not the whole listening. Okay, this is only just the beginning part of it, so you guys can get a view of it. So most likely I would do this, like I said, the topic, thesis, the first main idea, and the second main idea. Then I'll let them do the rest on their own. I understand that it's still the first week and they might have difficulties. However, this is just the way it is, and they'll learn as they go. But I do want to help them out. So just so you know, the way I write my notes is for me to know where to pause. I usually just write the transition words or keywords that I'm looking for. Okay, so that way when I hear them, I know where to pause. So for example, to begin with, okay, to begin with is my first main idea. So in my notes, I know when I hear to begin with, I'm going to pause it. I'm going to elicit from them, what is the transition word? Good. So this is our first main idea. Good. So let's listen to what we're about to hear. I'll play some of it and then I'll pause again. Okay. Same thing here for in addition. Okay. I have in addition over here. So then again, I know that when I hear that in addition, I'm going to pause it again. I'll do the same thing. Okay, guys, what transition word did you hear? Good. What does that signal? It signals our second main idea. So we're going to get our main idea and then we're going to get minor details to support it. Okay. However, like I said, there's many different ways you can prep. Some people, they like to put timestamps. Okay. So like maybe you have here like, hey, this one is like 0.55 seconds in. And then this one is, I don't know what the time is, 1.30 seconds in. Okay. Some teachers I know like to do that, but that's just different ways that you guys can prep. But it is important that you are prepared for this. They can be rather long sometimes, so just keep that in mind. Okay. You can also, I don't know, depending on your branch, maybe keep a script if that makes you feel more comfortable. But it's always good to have a set of notes. That way it's easy for you to write it on the board and you know how you're going to organize them when you go through them. Okay. Okay. So again, okay, there will be the questions for the listening section. Okay. Again, these are basically IBT TOEFL questions, but they do not go over all of them. Okay. And there's about not too many of them. There's usually about like 6 or I think like 8. Okay. So here for this, they should be able to answer majority of the questions, and majority of the questions are factual based. So it should come directly from your notes section. Okay. So here for this, don't give them too much time. If you don't know, you should give them a little bit of time, but overall for the IBT TOEFL, you're looking for students to answer questions within about 1 minute and 20 seconds. So I usually give them about 1 minute. Okay. However, with especially newer students or the beginning of the term, I'll usually give them a good 10 minutes to try to answer these questions. Okay. But you don't want to give them 20 minutes to answer these questions. It just won't set the right pace for them. And it's not something that they need to learn. And that's probably one of the most difficult things for a lot of the students, isn't necessarily the content always, but sometimes just the pace of the test and having to get through it in the amount of time that they have. So keep that in mind for both your questions in both reading and in listening. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. So actually questions have to wait till the end. Okay. So then you have the discuss page. Okay. So again, just like in the reading section, right? There's a discuss page. For this discuss page, they're just explaining how the two ideas of both the reading and listening are connected in a sense. So on the top part is what the listening was saying. And then on the bottom part, this is actually the reading section. Okay, so that's all they're really doing here. Again, you don't necessarily have to go over everything that was in the listening. This is a time again to bring out a media card, a YouTube video, something to make the topic a little bit more interesting. Okay, this topic might not be so interesting to your students. However, some of the other topics you'll have better access to videos and you'll have better ideas and stuff like that. Okay. Lastly, the only other thing that you're supposed to do on this page is just click the answer, and this will give you kind of a breakdown of everything that we just did. Okay, so here, this is kind of like a breakdown of your note section of your listening, but obviously you would need way more notes than this to actually answer any of the questions. It's just really a rough outline of it. Okay. All right. So for the actual writing lessons, again, the writing lessons are odd weeks, and then the speaking lessons are even weeks. Okay. So now they've integrated, or they've actually started using an integrated summary writing skill, which is very important because we actually never really had it before. And then students would have to complete the integrated writing, and it was extremely hard for them. Okay. So what they've provided is first a basic overview. So it's kind of like a simple example of what the integrated writing is. Okay. So here, for example, they're saying, hey, read the passage. You're explaining them, hey, you're going to have a passage. This is not a full passage. Normally, the passage will be about 3 paragraphs at least. Okay. So keep that in mind that this is just an example. Okay. Here, it's hard to tell, but this little light bulb, you can actually click it, and then it's going over and saying, hey, this is the main idea. This is one of the key points. Okay. And then these are the major details. So basically, they're using their skim, scan, annotate techniques, okay, for this section. Then there is the audio, okay, but this audio button, it does not click, okay. Instead, you'll click this, and it's just a script of the lecture. Okay, I wish the audio clicked. Okay, but there's a script of the lecture. Maybe if you wanted to, you could maybe do eyes on teacher so that they can't see it, and then you could read the script out loud. That way, they can get the feel of what it's like to read and then listen. Okay. And then finally, they're telling, hey, this is how you do an outline. Okay. And then at the end, they're supposed to like write their own summary. Okay. Here, they're giving us some basic tips on that. Okay. Overall, the tips are okay. I wouldn't say they're the best. So I'll give you guys some extra tips and stuff like that. But overall, I do like that they've introduced this. And I think for the first lesson, especially because you are really going to be backed up on time, I would definitely go over this example. And I definitely try to use this at least to introduce, hey guys, I know it's far away, but week 10, you're going to be responsible for an integrated writing. Let me go over. What is it? Oh, you'll have a reading passage. Then you'll have a listening passage. They're going to be connected, and you need to write that into an essay. Okay. I try to get the first paragraph or the introduction, which is basically this one right here. How are they connected? Okay. Then they give you a reading, listening. Okay. And this one is an actual practice.
There has been much discussion about changing the work week from the current 5.
Okay, so here I would probably not click any of those light bulbs in the first page, and I would use just this practice maybe, okay? Because this is like a real practice, and I'd walk them through it. But it also depends how confident you are in the integrated writing and how much you maybe know about it. So maybe it's really up to you. But here, it's kind of giving you a much better actual practice. It's only 52 seconds, which isn't very long. Okay, and then they can write. Okay. So for this, the writing integrated section, on top of this though, okay, in their workbooks, okay, for their iLearning homework, they're going to have to write. So whenever we're practicing the essays and we're practicing the speakings, if you don't know, that is also going to be their homework for that week. They're going to have to go home and write an integrated essay, or they're going to have to go home and give a persuasive opinion response, okay? So in their workbooks, they actually have it. So here, okay, iLearning, writing and speaking on even and odd weeks, okay? So here they've actually given us a nice little template in order to do it. I think this is pretty good and I do like this and I would definitely use this. If anything, I might just go over the tablet skills, explain it, but I would definitely do this because one, it's going to help them with their homework, and two, right, is just killing two birds with one stone, and they can actually write it in their workbook. Their parents can see it, okay? And you can actually mark it and double check it a lot easier, okay? So here, what this is based off of, though, is the today's reading and the day's lecture. So for example, today we were talking about how work has changed due to COVID-19, okay? So here, what you need to do is you need to explain to them, okay, some things about the integrated writing, okay? Number one, with integrated writing, there are only 3 ways that they can relate, okay? They can cast doubt, add information. Oh, I'm blanking. Cast out, add information, or support, okay? So here, these are the only 3 ways that can I make this smaller? How do I move this? These are the only 3 ways that the listening and reading will relate, okay? So the best way I can explain it is when you add information, that means you're giving like a third detail or an extra main idea, okay? When you're supporting, that means you're giving an example of a main idea. And when you cast doubt, that means kind of like a contrast, okay? So the reason, and sometimes a lot of times in the books that you'll read, and I'm sure in the lessons, they'll say that it's a contrast, but it's actually not a contrast. And I'll explain that in a second, okay? So of those 3, 99% of the time, okay, it has always been cast out, okay? I don't know why, but the achievement test they only use cast out. I have no clue why, but that's just what it is. There are other ways. And if you actually take the real IBT TOEFL, it can be any of those 3, and you have to identify it. But for whatever reason, it's always been cast out, okay? So the reason I say cast out is not contrast is because you're talking about one topic, okay? So for example, the topic of the reading and the topic of the listening of Albatross Plus lesson 1 is the idea of how COVID, okay, has affected the workforce, okay? So that is the topic, okay? And because of that, we're, doing other things like Zoom meetings like right now, okay? So here, the way I explain it is, if you're doing a contrast, you'll be talking about 2 things. So for example, one person will say, I think blue is the best color. Blue is the best because it's the color of the sea and it's the color of the sky. Someone else says, no, no, no. Red is the same. Well, red is the best color. Red is the color of fire. Red is the color of blood, okay? I'm talking about 2 colors, okay? But the topic is only talking about 1 color. So for example, I think red is the best color, color of fire, color of blood. And then I'll say, no, I don't think red is the best color. Red is the color of danger. Red is the color of stop, okay? So here, this is talking about the same topic, okay? The only thing is that they'll have different opinions, okay? So the reading, okay, thought that all this stuff of COVID and work has had benefits, okay? While the lecture cast doubt, saying, no, there was more negatives or there were some negative impacts, okay? So here, this is how, okay, in a sense, you will have them write, okay, their overall thesis, okay, or the main idea. This is pretty much their first paragraph, okay? So just as a note, one thing you want to keep in mind a lot of the times, little things when you're actually doing the actual IBT TOEFL, okay, is that what's it called? The listening never, I'm sorry, the reading never speaks. It's just like a small little thing, but you'll lose a lot of points. For example, they might say the reading said, and that's incorrect because the reading doesn't say anything. The lecture says, or the listening, right, said. It's just a small little thing, but they do lose points on the actual TOEFL. So it's just something you can teach your students, okay? So here, once you get the benefits and the negatives, right, for the reading and the listening, these are just basically your main ideas and major details and stuff, okay? You should be able to go back to the listening notes and back to the reading notes and just have them write it in, okay? But then to put it together, there's two methods to put it together, and that's called the block method or the point-by-point method. So the block method is pretty simple. Pretty much, you're just going to give us all your reading, major details and minor details that support of the benefits. That'll be in paragraph number 2. And then paragraph number 3 will all be your listening, main ideas, and major details that support the listening, okay? Your essay will only be 3 paragraphs, no more. You do not need a conclusion because this is not a personal essay. The more common way that people will use for cast out is a point-by-point method, okay? Now, a lot of examples, and sometimes they'll have the example where you just do the reading and then you do the lecture. You do the reading and then you do the lecture. This is actually not correct, okay? This is not correct. What you should always do first at the beginning of your paragraph is the lecture. The lecture should always come first. The lecture details, the lecture main ideas. Then at the end of the paragraph, in the last couple of sentences, you should have the reading details. So for your paragraph number 2, okay, in a sense, you want anywhere between 60 to 70% of that paragraph to be about the lecture and the remaining percentage to be about the reading. You can literally write one sentence for the reading, and you can literally say at the end, however, this refutes the reading, or this casts out the reading, which stated main idea. The reason is because the question is actually telling you to summarize the lecture. It does not tell you to summarize the reading passage, okay? So the main point is to summarize the majority of the lecture. This is another reason why it's important that you have a good set of notes for your students to go home with. That way they can do this integrated writing for homework, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so again, this is called the point-by-point, okay? But you can also do the block method. If you have students do like a 50-50, I wouldn't say that it's horrible. However, if you have students who are going to go take the real IBT TOEFL, I would definitely let them know that they should have more of the lecture, and it should be at the beginning of the paragraph, okay? All right. Other than that, here for the iLearning, this term is pretty easy. It's a topical speaking. It's basically an opinion speaking. So here again, the prompt is based off of the day's lesson. You can introduce it and they can then brainstorm it. They have a choice usually, right? Whether or not they agree or disagree, or choice A or choice B. Here, I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to go in depth on this. I think you just give students time to practice, use proper transition words, and have logical support. They should have plenty of support from the day's lesson in order to be able to express themselves. The only other thing is make sure that they stay within the time limits, right? Given otherwise, it's not a full speech, it's not a presentation, right? They need to get everything done in 45 seconds. Okay. All right. So those are basically the main components. So just to give you an idea for the listening. I'm sorry, not the listening, the speaking. So here, forming your own perspective, right? Making a claim. Okay, there's a lot of exercises and stuff. I don't necessarily go over all these exercises, but more forming your perspective, coming up with your opinion. Should efforts be made to introduce sustainable food prayer? Yes, I agree. Food, efforts should be made. No, I disagree. Efforts should be made for several reasons. First of all, second, third, so forth. Okay, so I think those ones are pretty easier. That's why also I say for the reading, for the speaking, you probably only need about 30 minutes depending on the size of your class. But for the writing, you're definitely going to want to try to give yourself at least 40 minutes. Okay, also students actually need to write out their parts and stuff. Okay. Okay, so other than that, there's just a few other things, a few differences and a few things you need to keep in mind. This will happen in both your C1 and C2. But here there's something called career note. Okay, so career note happens weeks 3, 6, 9, and 12. These are also the same times when you need to input your C learning grades. Okay, when you see your C-learning grades when they pop up, there will be a section for the career note. Pretty much basically all it is a review of the past 3 topics that you had. So for example, the topic for Albatross Plus, okay, which we just went over, is reshaping the workforce due to COVID-19, food security, right? The future of food, and then the rise of content creators, okay? Here, you're supposed to brainstorm what type of jobs or what type of careers they might have later on in the future, helping them develop their own path in life. And then they're just supposed to explain it and present it to the class. That way you can input a grade on that day on how well they did, okay? So that'll be in your C-learning grades input, so keep that in mind. Here, you have to print it out off of the FTP, or there should be some access by your FM, okay? Lastly, there is, okay, the iLearning components, okay? So it is important that you take the time to review and remind students to complete iLearning. I understand that we don't grade them ourselves. However, we do have an impact on them, and we do want to see how the results are. So for example, like I said, if you went over the reading and if you went over, right, the integrated writing, this is also when they'll have to do it, weeks 1, 3, 5, and 7. Okay, essay writings, weeks 9 and 11. Okay, hopefully, right, you'll see their grades improve on those as you teach them more and more skills from the SMART textbook. Okay, then again, the topical speaking, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 even weeks. Okay, so other than that, co-location, vocabulary, and production chunks, this is all for your vocabulary test and review test. In the workbook, there are also practices. We make our students absolutely write those 5 times each, English, 5 times, 5 times, 5 times, and check it, okay? It's just repetition, and vocabulary is probably one of the biggest things for especially Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus that's going to help them level up. The vocabulary becomes a lot more difficult for them, and they need to have a much stronger grasp of it, okay? So I strongly recommend you emphasize the importance of vocabulary, okay? So I think that's pretty much it. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? No, everyone's good. You got to speak up. There's like 70 of you in here, so I can't see if you're like just raising your hand. Speak up or type something.
Oh, sorry. I don't have any. So far, I don't have questions. Yeah.
Okay. There'll be a recording, Matthew, I think, so you can take a look at that. Okay. All right, then we're gonna end early. I got another meeting to go to. You probably got another meeting to go to. Have a great end of term, okay?
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.